Welcome back to the With Joey. Ugh, wow, that was terrible. Welcome back to the With Joe Wehbe podcast. I'm going to leave that in because remember, as I said in the introduction, I'm an idiot. We're off to a flying start. It can only get better from here. I want to do something I haven't done for a while, just actually read directly from the blog for today's episode. It's called Why Cavemen Didn't Want Sports Cars. And I'm going to do that because pretty much every episode is inspired directly from the blog. But I do try and obviously deliver the best insight or conversation I can off the back of it. Sometimes I feel that the piece for that day is good enough as is. So I think today's one of those days. So forgive me, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will be head down reading. Why Cavemen Didn't Want Sports Cars. When I was just 4 years old, I wanted a Woody toy. He was my favourite character from the Disney film Toy Story. Though if I'd been born in 1980 or 1880, I wouldn't have wanted a Woody. We know a lot about early civilization from cave paintings and archaeological research. Without ever having read a book on this subject, I can safely say that despite the many records on cave walls, there are no paintings of Ferraris or Lamborghinis by cavemen. I think it's because cavemen did not appreciate fast cars. When I was a bit older, maybe 10 this time, I saw my friends playing with Yu-Gi-Oh cards at school. I went home and started watching this show on weekday mornings with my brother. Then we both went and demanded of our mother that we might too get Yu-Gi-Oh cards. When I was 11, I begged my mother for a mobile phone. And I got it. It swiveled around at the top, an old Motorola, which now belongs in a museum. It is now quite normal in the West for 11-year-olds to have mobile phones. But no child who grew up in the 17th century ever bugged at their parents to get a mobile phone, and they didn't seem bothered by the prospect. Just like the cavemen and the sports cars. Is there any more complicated combination of two words in the language of man than I want? I'm in my 20s now, and what's changed? In the world around me, amongst those my age, the pattern has not changed, just the objects. If I told you now that my deepest craving was to receive a new Woody toy or Yu-Gi-Oh cards, you'd laugh me off the page. Or the camera. Because it is not socially acceptable anymore for me to do so. Well, to hell with you. That's when you realize that you don't really want the things you want. The term I want is an abbreviation of so much. I want rarely means that I, a completely independent and rational being, covets or wants something for its merits alone. We all want things in context. We are made to want them because of our peers, what we see in films, and what we see over the neighbour's fence. We are wired to want or desire things in this way, because at an early stage in evolution, such an inbuilt mechanism served us well in order to survive. We wanted to have as much food or crops as our neighbours. Now, times have changed. Most people go their whole lives without realizing. They go their whole lives without ever realizing that they didn't really want the things they wanted. They only wanted them because they thought others wanted them. That is not you, nor will it ever be, so long as there is breath in my lungs. Now, this is probably not a novel idea. This is probably not a new idea at all. I know, in particular, it's a big Rene Girard idea, who draws, I believe, this is indirect, I've been shared this knowledge, that, draws the triangle, which is us, someone else, the thing they're looking at, and we see what they're looking at and imagine that we want it too, and we're wired to respond to social proof, to want what others want. So let's take a moment where we zoom out, where we get in a helicopter and step back and instead look down at all those things that we value and place stock in. Because so many of them didn't exist, other people didn't need them and never thought about them because they're outside of their awareness. Or they hadn't come into reality yet. They're inconceivable. And, sometimes ignorance is bliss on that level. The reality of today is just appreciating that. Cavemen didn't want Ferraris. So much of the things you want, I say want, but you might think you need them. You don't actually want for any very, very good essential reason. You mainly want them because others want them. Things that you probably couldn't imagine. Things that you think are so you that there's no way you can conceive that they're not your idea. That they're not things that truly align with you. And I used to think that too. It's very interesting where we get our ideas from. Think about all the times someone said you'd be a great, you'd be a great singer, you'd be a great writer, you'd be a great lawyer, you'd be a great husband, a great wife, a great mother. And that's just one example. All right, I talked about things, objects in the blog piece. But what about pieces of our identity? What about the very things we're spending time on that we think we chose independently? How do we figure out the difference? How do we get clarity? Well, it's not necessarily the end of the world. It depends on the extent to which the things we're pursuing really serve us. Everyone wants a loving, or most people want a loving relationship. Most people want a car to get around. It doesn't make those things bad. But having the ability to detach from them when it serves us is also really all we need to do, instead of pursuing things by default, automatically, without any processing, without any consideration as to whether we have ideals, goals, or drives that conflict. And that's probably the extent to which we need to be aware of this. All right, it's easy to observe in things that never existed before, but even things that have always existed. Where does the attraction come from? Where does the desire come from? Does it really come from us? So that's something you can think about today. If you can spot any of the things that you're seeking that maybe don't resonate with you, that don't fit in your minimum viable lifestyle, that don't resonate with you when you think about what your audience of none might be. When you think about if you only had 5 years to live, and you think about if that were the case, what you do differently, and the things that don't fit in that picture. These are the exercises you can start doing to figure out the difference. But I'll leave that with you. That blog post was called Why Cavemen Didn't Want Sports Cars, which is the title of this podcast episode. So if you need to refer back to it, it's there. Apart from that, we'll be trucking on. We'll be here again tomorrow on the With Joe Wehbe podcast. So until then, as always, just remember to share this with anyone it might open the door for, because the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to concentrate on opening doors for others. Thank you.